The authority responsible for issuing money attempts to counteract the decline in value by further increasing the supply of money, thus supply and demand drift further apart, and the reciprocal effects that we have noted produce a cumulative decline in the value of money. This distrust of the value of money produced by government coinage, in contrast to the confidence in the value of specie, may assume a form in which, as in the later Roman Republic, coin circulates only in the retail trade, whereas large-scale transactions are carried on with money which is reckoned by weight. Only in this fashion, it was believed, could trade be protected against political crises, party interests, and government interference. The supply of money. It may appear from the foregoing that the inconveniences of an unlimited increase in the volume of money are attributable not so much to the increase itself, but rather to the way in which it is distributed. Shocks, hypertrophy, and stagnation occur only because the newly created money is initially in one hand and spreads from there in an uneven and inappropriate manner. This might be avoidable if a way could be found of distributing the money equally or according to some principle of equity. Thus, it has been said that if every Englishman were suddenly to find that he had twice as much money in his pocket, all prices would increase correspondingly, but no one would gain any advantage. The only difference would be that the pounds, shillings, and pence would have to be calculated in larger amounts. This would not only dispose of the objection to token money, but would also illustrate the advantages of an increase in the volume of money, arising from the empirical fact that more money means more transactions, greater well-being, power, and culture. There is little to be gained from a discussion of such hypotheses, based upon quite unrealizable presuppositions, yet they lead to a better understanding of the real conditions which render a gradual elimination of the intrinsic value of money impossible. Let us assume an ideal condition in which an increase in the volume of money has brought about an equal increase in what every individual owns, then one conclusion, that nothing has changed because all prices rise equally, contradicts the other, that the increase in the volume of money brings about a stimulation and expansion of trade. It is tempting to assume that the relations between individuals, that is the relative social position of superiors and inferiors, would in this case remain unchanged, while the total sum of objective cultural goods would be increased, that the content and enjoyment of life in an absolute sense would have risen both generally and for each individual, without changing anything in the relationship between wealth and poverty, which mutually determine each other. It might be pointed out that the modern commercial culture has already made available to the poor a number of goods, public amenities, educational opportunities, means of subsistence, etc., which even well-to-do people did not enjoy formerly, without changing the relative position of rich and poor. The possibility that an increase in the volume of money, distributed proportionately, extends objective culture and also the cultural content of the individual life in absolute terms, while the relations among individuals remain the same, deserves examination. On closer scrutiny, however, it appears that real success can be achieved only by an unequal distribution of the increased supply of money, at least in the first instance. Money, which is entirely a social institution and quite meaningless if restricted to one individual, can bring about a change in general conditions only by changing the relations between individuals. The increased liveliness and intensity of commerce that ensues from a plethora of money can be traced to the fact that the desire for money increases at the same time. The wish to acquire as much money as possible from other people, though always present, evidently becomes sufficiently urgent to lead to extraordinary exertion and diligence only when the individual becomes acutely aware of having less than others. This is the sense of the remark, laissez-faire, c'est l'argent d'autres. If what the above theory presupposes were true, namely, that an increase in the volume of money would leave the relations of people to each other and the relative prices of commodities completely unchanged, there would be no such stimulation of work energies. Moreover, the magical doubling of the volume of money will also affect the relations between individuals. Because the financial situation of the individuals is different to begin with. The doubling of three different incomes of 1,000, 10,000 and 100,000 marks, for instance, changes the relation between the recipients because the objects bought for the second 1,000, 10,000 marks, etc., are not simply duplicates of what was bought for the first 1,000 marks, and so on. In the first case there would be, perhaps, an improvement in nutrition, in the second a refinement of artistic culture, and in the third a greater involvement in financial speculation. If we assume a preceding absolute equality among individuals, then no changes would be produced either in the subjective or in the objective aspects of their lives, because if the latter changed then it would be in an unpredictable way. They would show an upswing of activity only if the differences in individual incomes became, or were felt to be, more important than previously. Even more relevant to our purposes are considerations about the factual implications of this theory, namely, that the doubling of all money incomes would leave everything unchanged, because all commodity prices would be simultaneously doubled. This reasoning is false, because it overlooks a peculiar and decisive characteristic of money, which might be termed its relative inelasticity. This consists in the fact that the distribution of an additional quantity of money in a given economic region does not raise all prices proportionately, but creates new price relationships which do not necessarily result from the power of individual interests. Inelasticity is a consequence of the fact that the money price of a commodity, despite its relativity and the absence of an inherent connection with the commodity, nevertheless acquires a certain stability and appears to be the objectively adequate equivalent. If the price of an object has remained stable within definite limits, then it does not usually change without resistance simply because the value of money has changed. The association of concepts as well as of interests between the object and its price has become psychologically so firmly fixed that the seller will not readily admit a decline or the buyer an increase, as would be a matter of course if the balancing of money value and commodity value were accomplished by the same unrestricted mechanism through which the thermometer rises or falls. According to the temperature without any disturbance of the exact relation between cause and effect resulting from change in the degree of resistance to the movement. If one suddenly has twice as much money in one's pocket as a short time before, one is not inclined immediately to pay twice the amount for each commodity. Or it may be that with the bravado of the newly rich, reckoning the new wealth by the previous standards, one will not trouble about price at all. However, both the willingness to pay more and the disinclination to pay as much as the new appropriate price show that a proportional regulation of prices is out of the question during the initial period of abundant money, and that the established association between a commodity and a traditional range of prices has a continuously disturbing influence. Furthermore, the demand for commodities will change considerably following an increase or decrease in the quantity of money, even if this affects everybody equally. If there is a decrease, for instance, objects that have a sufficiently steady sale may still be sold at half the price up to that amount or even in greater abundance, but beyond a certain limit they may not find any buyers at all.